Friends, if you compare the history of our national struggle with histories of similar struggles in other parts of the world, you will realize that we in India have lacked one thing and one thing alone. We lack the strength and organization whereby we can meet force with force. I am confident that with the help of my countrymen in East Asia, I shall be able to organize such a gigantic force as will be able to sweep away the British power from India. The hour has struck, and every patriotic Indian must advance towards the field of battle. Only when the blood of freedom-loving Indians begins to flow will India attain her freedom. Inqilab Zindabad. Azad Hind Zindabad.
Our struggle is no doubt a non-violent struggle. But even a non-violent struggle demands an army, an organization, and a machinery. India is going to be free, and that we who live today are going to play a part in making India free. There is no power on earth that can keep India enslaved anymore. Let us strive for India's freedom one day more.
In 1938, Mahatma Gandhi chose a radical young colleague, Subhash Chandra Bose, to be president of the Indian National Congress. The following year, differences over immediate political strategy and future socio-economic policy led to the parting of their ways. But the imperatives of the Second World War brought about a measure of convergence in their aims and ideology. In 1942, Mahatma Gandhi launched a mass movement in an attempt to force the British to quit India. Outside India's northeastern frontiers, in 1943, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose raised an army of liberation. To the Indian people, Netaji, their revered leader, came to represent the revolutionary current of Indian nationalism and an alternative, egalitarian vision of social transformation in free India.
I appeal to you to go out in your hundreds and in your thousands to the remote villages of India to preach the message of the Indian National Congress, which is the message of freedom. Every commodity in this world has its price. So also has freedom.
Subhash Chandra Bose was born in Cuttack, Orissa, on 23rd January 1897 to Bengali parents Janakinath and Prabhavati Bose. In the course of his brilliant, if turbulent, school and college career, he was inspired by the writings of Vivekananda and developed a sensitive social conscience. He displayed flashes of rebellion against the exercise of arbitrary authority, whether in political or social spheres. A student of philosophy at the universities of Calcutta and Cambridge, Subhash passed high into the Indian civil service. But in September 1920, he wrote to his elder brother, Sharath Chandra Bose, "National and spiritual aspirations are not compatible with obedience to civil service conditions." He resigned from the ICS in April 1921 to join the non-violent non-cooperation movement then raging all over India. Subhash accepted as his political guru Deshabandhu Chittaranjan Das, a man who shared his total dedication to the cause of India's political deliverance on the basis of Hindu-Muslim unity. But the apprenticeship in nationalist agitation and the Calcutta Corporation was cut short by Subhash's imprisonment, followed by his mentor's death. The rigors of prison life in Burma from 1924 to 1927 saw the graduation of a lieutenant to a leader. In the late 20s, Subhash Chandra Bose and Jawaharlal Nehru emerged as dynamic leaders of India's youth and spokesmen of the rising left in national politics. Subhash Bose's appearance at the Calcutta session of the Congress in 1928 was not so much a spectacle as a vision of the future. Marching a step ahead of his compatriots, he sought, despite Gandhi's opposition, to replace dominion status with complete independence as the goal of the Indian National Congress. He was narrowly defeated in 1928. When the famous resolution calling for Purna Swaraj, or complete independence, was passed a year later at Lahore, he went a step further in calling for a total boycott, a shadow government, and a movement to assert the rights of three large oppressed communities: women, the so-called depressed classes, and the laboring masses. When he was not in prison in the early 1930s, he served as mayor of Calcutta in 1931 and took part in the civil disobedience agitations. A seriously ill Subhash was released from detention only after he had boarded ship for Europe in February 1933. Bose's enforced exile in Europe from 1933 to 1936 witnessed the transformation of a leader into a statesman. As unofficial ambassador of India in bondage, he traveled tirelessly, establishing organizations and winning friends for the cause of India's freedom in Europe. He visited Austria, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Romania, Poland, Belgium, France, Greece, Egypt, Ireland, Switzerland, Hungary, Turkey, Italy, and Germany. He made strong public protests against Nazi racism and denounced the new German nationalism as not only narrow and selfish, but arrogant. The high point of his European sojourn was his visit to Dublin, where he held several rounds of talks with Eamon de Valera. Although he was barred from visiting Britain, he expounded on his political philosophy of anti-imperialism and Samyavada, an Indian variant of socialism, in an important speech written for a London conference. His major work, The Indian Struggle, was written in 1934. By 1937, the Bose brothers of Bengal, Sharat and Subhash, had returned from long years of imprisonment and exile to become key players on the All India political stage. In 1938, Subhash became the youngest president of the Indian National Congress. At Haripura, Subhash Chandra Bose articulated his views on a range of key issues. On the question of political freedom, he wanted to erase every trace of British domination, but saw prospects of cordial relations with the British people once India had real self-determination. On political democracy, he came out in favor of multiple parties and intra-party democracy within the Congress. On the communal problem, he advocated a policy of live and let live in matters religious and understanding on matters economic and political. He suggested that Hindustani, a mixture of Hindi and Urdu, written in the Roman script, would be the best link language for India, and promised cultural autonomy for religious and linguistic minorities.
Friends, those of you who are poor and obscure, I should like to see your poverty and obscurity devoted to the service of your motherland. Work that she might prosper, suffer that she might rejoice.
As Congress President, Bose negotiated with Muhammad Ali Jinnah, President of the Muslim League, in an attempt to undo the damage caused by Congress's rebuff of the League following the 1937 provincial elections. Looking to the future, Bose established a national planning committee to draw up blueprints for the social and economic reconstruction of free India. By 1939, Bose's honeymoon with the Gandhian right wing of the Congress was over. In a bitterly contested election, he won a second term, defeating Gandhi's nominee, Pattabhi Sitaramaiah. From his sickbed at the Tripuri session of the Congress, the elected president had to contend not so much with the colonial masters, to whom he wanted to give a 6-month ultimatum to quit India, but with the animosity of his defeated colleagues. The right-wingers were able to push through a resolution requiring the President to appoint the Congress Working Committee in consultation with Mahatma Gandhi. Thereupon Gandhi decided on a course of non-cooperation, refusing to suggest any names. Unable to break the deadlock, Subhash Chandra Bose resigned as Congress President at a meeting of the All India Congress Committee in Calcutta in April 1939. Throughout the bruising political battles of 1939, Subhash received the unflagging support of Rabindranath Tagore. The poet welcomed in his abode of peace, Shantiniketan, the rebel leader of the nationalist movement. In a glowing eulogy, Rabindranath hailed Subhash as Deshanayak, leader of the country, and expressed confidence that his apparent defeat would be turned into a permanent victory. In August 1939, Bengal's two luminaries came together in Calcutta to articulate their dream of a Mahajati, a great and dignified expression of Bengal's nationhood.
যে শক্তির প্রতিষ্ঠা করবার সংকল্প করেছি তা সেই রাষ্ট্রশক্তি নয় যে শক্তি শত্রু মিত্র সকলের প্রতি সংশয় সন্তর্কিত। জাগ্রত চিত্তকে আহ্বান করি, যার সংস্কার মুক্ত উদার আতিথ্যে মনুষ্যত্বের সর্বাঙ্গীন মুক্তি অকৃত্রিম সত্যতা লাভ করে। এখান থেকে এই প্রার্থনা মন্ত্র যুগে যুগে উচ্ছ্বসিত হতে থাক। বাঙালির পণ, বাঙালির আশা, বাঙালির কাজ, বাঙালির ভাষা। সত্য হোক, সত্য হোক, সত্য হোক হে ভগবান। বাঙালির প্রাণ, বাঙালির মন, বাঙালির ঘরে যত ভাই বোন। এক হোক, এক হোক, এক হোক হে ভগবান। সেই সঙ্গে কথা যোগ করা হোক বাঙালির বাহু, ভারতের বাহুকে বল দিক। বাঙালির বাণী, ভারতের বাণীকে সত্য করুক।
In September 1939, the Second World War broke out in Europe. Without caring to consult Indian opinion, Viceroy Linlithgow declared India to be a belligerent in the war against Germany. The Congress ministries in 8 out of the 11 provinces of India resigned in protest. In 1940, Gandhi launched a campaign of individual satyagraha, asking his followers to make anti-war speeches and court arrest. Subhash Bose, who was by now leading a group known as the Forward Bloc within the Congress, toured the country seeking to consolidate leftist forces on a platform of uncompromising anti-imperialism.
অনেকে আমাকে প্রশ্ন করছেন যে কংগ্রেস সভাপতির পদ ত্যাগ করবার পর আমি কি করব। এর উত্তরে আমি সর্বপ্রথমে আপনাদের স্মরণ করিয়ে দেব যে আজ ভারতবর্ষের সম্মুখে একটা মস্ত বড় সুযোগ উপস্থিত হয়েছে। এই সুযোগ যদি আমরা গ্রহণ করতে পারি, যদি ঠিক পথে চলে কৌশল অবলম্বন করে আমরা জাতিকে আমাদের গন্তব্যের পথে পরিচালিত করতে পারি, তাহলে অদূর ভবিষ্যতে পূর্ণ স্বরাজ লাভ করা আমাদের পক্ষে মোটেই কঠিন হবে না।
This is an opportunity which is rare in the history of a nation. I am sure, and I believe you, my countrymen, will agree with me that this is an opportunity which we cannot afford to lose, which India will not lose.
In July 1940, for the 11th time in his political career, Subhash Chandra Bose was cast into prison. In late November, he went on hunger strike, telling the government, "Release me, or I shall refuse to live. The individual must die so that the nation may live. Today, I must die so that India may live and may win freedom and glory." The government released him on 5th December 1940, having devised a cat-and-mouse policy, according to which Bose was to be rearrested as soon as he recovered his health. Meanwhile, his house on Elgin Road would be kept under round-the-clock police watch.
In the first week of December, Netaji was suddenly released from prison after a spell of hunger strike. He came home, and soon thereafter he called me, and we met in this room. And he asked me in Bengali, "Amar ekta kaj korte parbe?" And that started a long session of confabulations and discussions lasting for a month and a half, day after day, night after night, in order to work out what Netaji called a foolproof escape plan from this house. In the course of these discussions on the plan, Netaji introduced me to Mia Akbar Shah of Peshawar, who actually visited Calcutta on a pretext. And with Mia Akbar Shah, I actually made certain purchases for Netaji's disguise as a Muslim upcountry gentleman, an insurance agent who was traveling around the country. Finally, on the night of the 17th January 1941, Netaji and we tiptoed out of that room, walked down the entire length of the house, down that corridor, down the passage in the annex of the house, down the rear staircase. then drove out this driveway out of the building around 1:35 a.m. Took a turn to the right and to the south to mislead any possible watchers, but eventually took the Grand Trunk Road and drove the whole night to reach Dhanbad early in the morning. We kept Netaji hidden in my brother's house at a place called Barari near Dhanbad, and the next evening we bade him goodbye as if he was a stranger, then picked him up again in my car from the road and drove him up to Gomo station and reached him there to catch the Delhi Kalka mail on his way to Peshawar.
Subhash Chandra Bose was received in Peshawar by Mian Akbar Shah. He then hitchhiked across the frontier to Kabul. After a number of tense weeks in Kabul, Bose acquired an Italian passport, took the name of Orlando Mazzotta, and traveled by car and train to Moscow, from where he flew to Berlin. Although he held the Nazis in deep contempt, Bose went to Europe in order to gain access to Indian soldiers in the British Indian Army. He clearly identified this army as the ultimate instrument of colonial control. A domestic rod of order and an international fire brigade, it had been used to protect Britain's imperial interests not only in India, but in the Caribbean, Africa, the Middle East, China, and Southeast Asia. Bose was determined to subvert the loyalty of Indian soldiers to the King Emperor and replace it with a new loyalty to the Indian people and nation.
In diesem Kampf, der für Indien ein Kampf Sein oder Nichtsein ist, kann es nur einen Ausgang geben, unseren gemeinsamen Sinn.
From among Indian prisoners of war being held in Germany and Italy, Bose recruited an Indian legion. Other Indians resident in Europe, especially young students, helped him organize the Free India Center. It was in wartime Europe that Netaji, along with Abid Hassan and other associates, coined India's national greeting, Jai Hind. In June 1941, he denounced Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union, which wrecked his plans of an armed thrust by his Azad Hind Force into India from the northwest to help the unarmed freedom fighters at home. While waiting to find a way out of Europe, he tried to build in exile a microcosm of the free India of his dreams. After attacking Pearl Harbor in December 1941, Japan swept across Southeast Asia, destroying British imperial interests in that region. By March 1942, they had reached the gates of India. President Roosevelt of the United States and Labour Party ministers in Britain's war cabinet felt that something needed to be done urgently to conciliate Indian nationalist opinion. The British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill,